Imagine a city standing proudly at the crossroads of two continents, Asia and Europe, surrounded by seas on three sides and protected by massive layered walls that rise like an eternal fortress. This city was like the heart of the world, a dream of every conqueror, yet a nightmare for every attacker. That city was Constantinople. But long before its mighty walls were seen as impossible to break, the Prophet Muhammad SAW had already foretold its fate in a famous hadith. لا تفتحن القسطنطينية ولا نعم الأمير أميرها ولا نعم الجيش ذلك الجيش. Constantinople will surely be conquered. What a wonderful leader will its leader be, and what a wonderful army will that army be. This was not just good news, it became a flame that ignited the spirit of Muslims for centuries. Every generation dreamed, could I be that leader? Could we be that army? Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire. For centuries, Byzantium stood as a powerful stronghold of the Christian world. But for Muslims, Byzantium was not just another enemy, it was a thorn in the flesh, a constant threat. They broke peace treaties, attacked Muslim cities when people were unprepared, and even formed alliances with Crusader armies to shed Muslim blood. They burned villages, captured women and children, and struck from behind while Muslims were engaged in open battles. Historians recorded how Crusader forces passing through Constantinople allied with Byzantium and then attacked Muslim lands. In Jerusalem, tens of thousands of Muslims were killed. Crusader writers themselves proudly describe how blood filled the streets, so deep it reached the knees of their horses. How could Muslims ever forget such wounds? How could pain carved with blood and tears ever fade from the hearts of generations? Constantinople was not just a city, it was a symbol of Byzantine arrogance. And Muslims believed, as long as the city stood, the threat to the Muslim world would never truly end. Since the Prophet's hadith echoed through the ages, Muslim caliphs and commanders never stopped trying. In the time of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, his son Yazid led more than 100,000 soldiers toward Constantinople. Among them were companions of the Prophet, including Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, the flag bearer of the Messenger of Allah. But the walls of Constantinople did not fall. Abu Ayyub was martyred and buried at the foot of the city's wall, as if his body became a witness and a message. One day, the Prophet's promise will be fulfilled here. In the Umayyad era, again and again, large fleets were sent, but Greek fire, a secret Byzantine weapon that burned ships without being extinguished, destroyed all hope. The sea turned into a living hell. Thousands of martyrs fell, and the city still stood. In the Abbasid era, great caliphs like Harun al-Rashid and Mu'tasim also tried, but cannons had not yet been invented, and the walls of Constantinople remained unbreakable. Every attempt ended in failure. In the early Ottoman period, Usman, Orhan, Bayezid, Murad all tried to besiege the city. Bayezid came very close, but an attack from the east by Tamerlane forced him to retreat. Murad too tried again, but European crusader forced him to leave the siege. As centuries passed, tens of thousands of martyrs had fallen. Every time the banner of Islam approached the walls of Constantinople, Greek fire struck, harsh winters broke morale, and European reinforcements shattered the dream. To the world, Constantinople was an unconquerable city, but to Muslims, it was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. But why was this city so important? Its location was strategic. It controlled the sea route between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled global trade. Even Napoleon Bonaparte once said, if the world were a single country, Constantinople would be its capital. But that was not all. Constantinople was the last stronghold of Byzantium. As long as it stood, it would remain a threat. Bringing it down means destroying the pillar that had supported centuries of conflict. So even after repeated failures, the spirit of the Muslims never died. They believed the Prophet's promise was not an illusion. The only questions were when and who. The rise of a star from the east. Finally, as generations passed, when hope was nearly lost, a young boy was born in the Ottoman Empire. From childhood, he was trained not only with the sword, but also with the Quran. His teachers were scholars, memorizers of the Quran and warriors. He grew up with a gentle heart, but a strong and determined soul. His name was Muhammad bin Murad, later known to the world as Muhammad al-Fatih, Mehmed the Conqueror. History records that even as a child, he would often say to his teacher, I will be the one who conquers Constantinople. And his teacher, Sheikh Shamsuddin, strengthened his belief. You, O Muhammad, will be that leader, and I will be with you when the Prophet's promise is fulfilled. 8 centuries, thousands of martyrs, dozens of failures. Yet, the Prophet's promise was still alive. Constantinople still stood, its walls still towered high. Its seas were still protected by heavy iron chains. But behind all of that, destiny was being prepared. And when that light finally appeared, it did not come from an old emperor, nor from a gray-haired general, but from a young man, only 21 years old, who would shake the world and make history. Bow to his name. He was Muhammad al-Fatih, and this is the beginning of one of the greatest conquests in human history. Part 2: Muhammad al-Fatih and the Trial of the Eternal Wars. He was only 19 years old when the throne was given to him. His full name was Sultan Muhammad bin Murad bin Muhammad, but the world would come to know him as Muhammad al-Fatih, the Conqueror. This young man was no ordinary ruler. He had memorized Al-Quran. He was educated by great scholars like Sheikh Shamsuddin and Mullah Ghurani. He was trained in military strategy by the best generals. From a young age, he grew up with burning belief that he was the leader mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad. While other readers hesitated, he declared firmly, I will not live except to conquer Constantinople or be martyred at its gates. Turning a dream into preparation, Muhammad al-Fatih understood one thing: there was no room for error. Previous generations had proven it. Without extraordinary planning, Constantinople would never fall. So he prepared everything with precision. The first one is the fortress of Rumeli Hisar. At the narrowest point of the Bosporus Strait, he ordered the construction of massive fortress. Amazingly, it was completed in just 3 months. Muhammad himself designed it. From this fortress, he could control sea traffic and cut off Byzantine aid coming from the Black Sea. Historians call it the miracle of 15th century military architecture. The second one is the giant cannon of Urban, a Hungarian engineer named Urban. With unlimited funding, Urban created a weapon the world had never seen before, a massive cannon weighing hundreds of tons, firing stone balls over 1.5 tons each. It was pulled by 100 oxen and guarded by 400 soldiers. This weapon is often described as one of the first weapons of mass destruction in history. Army and Navy. More than 150,000 soldiers were prepared. At sea, he built a fleet of 150 ships. Even though the Ottomans were not yet dominant at sea, the Sultan knew that naval blockade was essential. The elite Janissary troops were prepared as the final assault force. The beginning of the siege was April 1453. In April 1453, the footsteps of the Muslims' army shook the world. Giant cannons were put into position, ships sailed to block the southern side, and in front of it all, Muhammad al-Fatih set up his tent near the gate of Saint Romanus. Standing before his army, his voice thundered, "O warriors, we stand at the edge of the Prophet's promise. Today we write the history. Between us and the paradise stands only this wall." The cries of Allahu Akbar echoed. Soldiers were moved to tears. Their spirit surged, waiting for the great day. The next day, April 6, the siege began. But their enemy was not ordinary city. 3 layers of walls rising up to 30 meters high, stretching 7 kilometers long, a moat 20 meters wide, always filled with water, a massive iron chain 750 meters long, blocking the entrance to the Golden Horn Harbor. Greek fire, a secret Byzantine weapon that could burn ships and could not be put out with water. No wonder every previous Muslim attempt had failed. Trials after trials. The first attack failed. The giant cannon roared. Their explosion shook the earth. Massive stones as large as houses were launched at the city walls. Cracks began to appear. The Muslim army cheered. But the Byzantines did not stay still. At night, they repaired every crack using sandbags and stones. By morning, the walls stood strong again. Every gap opened by the Muslims was closed again by their enemies. Days passed. Tens of thousands of shots were fired, yet the walls still stood. And finally, the cannon explodes. After weeks of continuous use, the great cannon, built by Urban, once the pride of the army, finally burst under extreme pressure. Urban was killed. It felt as if hope itself had shattered along with the cannon. Some soldiers began to doubt, will we end up like the generations before us? Defeat at the sea. On April 25 of Genoa's ships arrived, carrying food and reinforcements into the city. The Ottoman fleet, 150 ships, tried to stop them. The Sultan himself rode on horseback along the shore, shouting, "Destroy them, or do not return alive." But the Muslim ships were smaller and weaker. They were burned and overwhelmed by enemy fire. The 5 ships successfully broke through the chain of the Golden Horn and entered the city. From the shore, the Sultan struck the ground with his sword. Tears fell from his eyes. He was also furious that he nearly executed his naval commander for the failure. That night, the army fell into deep gloom. Hope was fading. The next one is the impossible strategy, ships over the hills. In the middle of despair, Muhammad al-Fatih sat in deep thought. His eyes were fixed on the massive iron chain stretching across the Golden Horn. It was impossible to break through from the sea. But suddenly, a bold, almost crazy idea appeared in his mind. If the ships cannot pass through the sea, then we will bring them over the land. The order was given immediately. Trees were cut down, their trunks were coated with oil. A pathway from the port of Galata to the Golden Horn was prepared. Soldiers and oxen were called to pull the ships. At night, cannons were fired continuously at the city walls to distract the enemy. Fires were lit to create smoke and block the Byzantines' view. War drums were beaten to hide the sounds of wheels and chains. And under the cover of darkness, something incredible happened. One by one, Ottoman ships were dragged over the hills and through forests, moving across land. Muslim soldiers poured out their blood and sweat to make it happen. Many were injured, some were crushed by the wheels. Some were even martyred during the operation. But by dawn, 70 ships had been successfully launched back into the water, inside the Golden Horn, behind the very chain that had never been broken. A morning that shocked the world. The next morning, as sunlight touched the city, the people of Constantinople looked toward the harbor. Their eyes widened, their lips trembled. Before them stood 70 Ottoman ships. Like ghost ships, they had appeared from nowhere. Cries and screams filled the air. They realized the chain that has trusted for so long was now meaningless. Fear began to creep into their hearts. Meanwhile, in the Muslim camp, cries of Allahu Akbar thundered. The soldiers who had been discouraged were now filled with new spirit. They wept with emotion. They fell in sujud, giving thanks. Muhammad al-Fatih smiled. Raising his hand to the sky, he whispered, "O Allah, the promise of your prophet is drawing near. Make us that army." The siege continued. Attack after attack was launched. Thousands of martyrs fell. But now the spirit could no longer be extinguished. With an impossible strategy turned into reality, the world began to realize this young man was no ordinary commander. He was a storm prepared by history to break the eternal walls. Constantinople was now surrounded by land and sea. The enemy began to weaken, and the prophet's promise was closer than ever to becoming reality. But the greatest test was still ahead. The decisive day, the day of conquest, was about to come. Part 3. The final assault and eternal victory. Signs from the sky. Long days of siege had caused thousands of martyrs to fall. But as the Muslim army was tasted with exhaustion and doubt, signs appeared in the sky as if strengthening their faith. That night the full moon turned red, then slowly faded. A lunar eclipse occurred. For the Byzantines, this was a sign of doom. An old prophecy from the Emperor Constantine said, "If the moon darkens and a full moon night, then Constantinople will fall." A few days later, a red light appeared above the dome of Hagia Sophia, then disappeared. The people of the city panicked. They believed their protecting angels had abandoned them. Then on May 25, a thick fog covered the city all day long. The Byzantines trembled, sensing destruction. Meanwhile, the Muslim army saw their signs. They fell in prostration in gratitude. They were certain the promise of Allah was near. The decisive night. Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih gathered his army. With a trembling voice full of conviction, he said, Tomorrow is great day. Tomorrow we will write history. Let your prayers, fasting, and supplications be your preparation. Prepare yourselves. Between us and paradise is only one night. That night the Muslim camp was filled with torchlight and the sound of prayers. Some recited Quran, some wept in prostration, while others remembered Allah until dawn. Meanwhile, inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI and his people gathered in Hagia Sophia, praying for miracle. But destiny had already been written. Morning of May 29, 1453, the final assault. Dawn broke, war drums thundered. From all sides of the walls, the Ottoman army launched their attack. For the first time, the Sultan ordered a full assault from every direction. The first wave, regular troops charged forward with cries, Allahu Akbar. They climbed ladders and crossed the moat, but many were killed. Their mission was simple, to exhaust the Byzantine defenses. The second wave, the Akinji cavalry followed. Faster, more experienced, they struck the already weakened defenses. Blood flowed. Bodies fell across the battlefield. The third wave, as the sun rose higher, the Janissaries advanced. This elite force was led directly by the Sultan. The cries Allahu Akbar shook the earth. The Byzantines tried to hold their ground. Emperor Constantine XI himself entered the battlefield, swinging his sword, but the walls were beginning to fall. Hassan Ulubatli, the flag bearer. In the middle of the fierce battle, a young soldier named Hassan Ulubatli led 30 of his companions. With the banner of Islam in his hand, he ran through a rain of arrows and spears. They managed to reach a cracked section of the wall. Hassan began to climb, his body already covered in wounds. Arrows pierced his chest, spears struck his body, but he kept climbing. Finally, with his last strength, he planted the Islamic flag on top of the highest wall. The cries of Allahu Akbar shook the sky. The Muslim army saw the flag waving and shouted, Constantinople has fallen. The Prophet's promise has come true. Moments later, Hassan Ulubatli was martyred along with 18 of his companions, but his sacrifice became undeniable proof. The fortress of Byzantium had fallen. This is the fall of Constantinople. The Emperor Constantine XI tried to defend the broken walls. He fought bravely, but in the end, he was killed among his soldiers. His body was never clearly found, as if it disappeared along with the fall of the city. The Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani, was seriously wounded and fled. When the defenders saw this, their morale collapsed. Byzantine soldiers panicked. Some threw down their weapons, some ran toward the harbor, others hid inside their homes. The city gates were opened from within. Muslim forces flooded into the city as the cries echoed, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Al-Fatih enters the city. By midday, Sultan Muhammad Al-Fatih rode his white horse into Constantinople through the gate of Santa Romanus. With a calm face, he entered the city. In front of his soldiers, he dismounted. Then he prostrated in gratitude and kissed the ground. Tears flowed from his eyes. The Prophet's promise had now been fulfilled through his hands. He was only 21 years old. The whole world expected a massacre. The long history of Byzantium was filled with blood. They had killed Muslims, captured children, and burned cities. It would have been natural to expect revenge. But Sultan Muhammad Al-Fatih was different. He upheld the ethics of Islam. He forbade his soldiers from killing civilians. He guaranteed safety for the people of the city. He allowed churches to remain except Hagia Sophia, which has converted into a mosque as the symbol of victory. He made Constantinople the new capital, naming it Istanbul, the city of Islam, later known as Istanbul. The people who once trembled in fear were astonished. They discovered that the conqueror was not a bloodthirsty monster, but a just leader full of mercy. The echo of victory across the world. News of the conquest spread quickly. The Christian world trembled. The Pope in Rome reportedly fell ill upon hearing the news. European kings held urgent meetings day and night. A city they once believed could never fall was now in Muslim hands. Meanwhile, the Muslim world rejoiced. From Cairo to Samarkand, from Mecca to Damascus, prayers of gratitude were raised. Scholars declare, today the Prophet's promise has been fulfilled, and Muhammad al-Fatih is that leader. This is an eternal legacy. The conquest of Constantinople was not just a military victory, it was a turning point in world history. It marked the end of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, which has stood for over 1,000 years. It established the Ottoman Empire as the global power. It opened the gateway for the spread of Islam into Europe. And most importantly, it proved that the promise of the Prophet was an undeniable truth. In the end, Constantinople did not fall because of weapons alone, not because of the size of the army. It fell because of faith, patience, and courage of a young man who believed in his Lord's promise. He was only 21 years old, but with a sword in his hand and faith in his heart, he shook the world. He was Muhammad al-Fatih. He was the leader spoken of the Prophet, and this is the story of one of the greatest conquests in human history. Thank you for watching this video until the end, and see you again in the next video inshallah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.